what makes Superman super? When we examine Superman, we need to remember that, in a sense, we're examining all the superheroes who follow. Superheroes have always been created with broad brushstrokes. Not a lot of time was spent on deducing the limits or non-limits of our super characters. Even less attention was paid to their interaction with ordinary people and objects. When Superman lifts a car over his head to shake criminals to the ground, no one ever questions why the car doesn't fall to pieces. Nobody questions how Superman stays perfectly balanced on Earth while waving over his head an item that has a mass 20 times greater than his own. How often have we seen Superman fly down and pull a car up by the roof into the sky? In the real world, there are few vehicles that would even hold together if Superman yanked them up by the roof. The car would probably continue forward, with the roof ripped off and held by Superman. Every time Superman lifts a building into the air, why don't all the bricks, held together by cement and pressure, suddenly start falling apart? Those are the types of ordinary problems that seem never to occur in any superhero adventures. Basically, superheroes perform super acts, and the Logic Squad cleans up afterwards. In Superman's first appearance in the 1938 Action Comics, we're informed that he could leap 1/8 of a mile, hurdle a 20-story building, raise tremendous weights, run faster than an express train, and that nothing less than a bursting shell could penetrate his skin. Siegel and Shuster's explanation of Superman's powers, as given in Action Comics #1, left much to the imagination. Their main premise was that Superman came from a civilization much more advanced than ours, and thus the inhabitants were physically more advanced than humans. By extrapolation, this argument implies that modern man is physically much stronger than Cro-Magnon man or Neanderthal man. Of course, our ancestors lived only a few hundred centuries before us, while Superman's race was described as being millions of years ahead of ours. A full-page illustration in Superman #1, summer 1939, gave a scientific explanation of Superman's amazing strength. Superman came to Earth from the planet Krypton, whose inhabitants had evolved after millions of years to physical perfection. The smaller size of our planet, with its slighter gravity pull, assists Superman's tremendous muscles in the performances of miraculous feats of strength. Thus, Siegel and Shuster gave two explanations for Superman's extraordinary powers. He was an alien from another planet not in our solar system, and the weak gravity of Earth compared to the gravity of his home world of Krypton gave him amazing strength. Both concepts came right from the pages of science fiction magazines of the time, and few readers questioned the logic of either assumption. However, we've made huge strides in science during the past 6 decades. Let's examine each premise based on today's knowledge. Alien visitors. Alien visitors from outer space have been a basic staple of science fiction since H.G. Wells first wrote The War of the Worlds in 1895. It's one of the few science fiction concepts that has crossed into mainstream belief. In 1939, the same year that Superman gained his own comic book, thousands of people were convinced by an Orson Welles radio dramatization of Welles' novel that Martians had landed in New Jersey. Siegel and Shuster weren't writing anything outrageous in terms of what people thought to be true, or still believe to be true. The only problem is dealing with cold scientific reality. Do aliens exist? Are they intelligent? If so, have they visited us? That's the basic underlying concept of Superman. These questions have spurred some of the hottest debates in modern astronomy. Let's examine each side of the arguments and see what they tell us about Superman. Pluralism, the belief that the universe is filled with planets harboring intelligent life, has been examined by philosophers, as well as scientists, for thousands of years. It was first championed by the Greek atomist philosophers Leucippus, Democritus of Abdera, and Epicurus in the 5th century BC. They believed that the Earth was produced by a chance collision of indestructible particles known as atoms. Since one world had been formed in such a fashion, they argued that other worlds with intelligent life were possible as well. Opposing the atomists were Aristotle and Plato, who argued that the Earth was unique and that no other worlds or intelligent life forms existed. Needless to say, the Aristotelian view of the universe was accepted by the Catholic Church because that viewpoint placed man in a special place in the universe. However, in the late 12th century, a number of scholars raised some serious religious arguments against Aristotle's belief that there was only one possible cosmos. Since God was omnipotent, these men declared, then stating God created only one universe was in a sense placing restrictions on God's power, which would thus imply that God was not all-powerful. In 1277, the Church eased its stance on the unique nature of the universe. Catholic doctrine was revised to say that God could have created other worlds with intelligent beings, but didn't. It was a very small step for science, but a major one. Following the same line of reasoning, Nicholas of Cusa in 1440 declared that whatever God could do would be done, a belief that became known as plenitude. Less than a century later, Copernicus argued convincingly that the sun was the center of the solar system, and the Earth was merely a planet revolving about it. Copernicus wisely didn't delve into the theological ramifications of his discovery, but other scholars and philosophers were soon debating the possibility of life on other worlds. For the next several hundred years, proponents and opponents of plenitude and pluralism argued about God's purpose in creating a universe filled with stars and planets. As usual in debates where men tried to explain God's purpose, neither side convinced the other that they were correct. Fortunately, by the mid-19th century, developments in science and astronomy made such debates moot. God's intent faded in the face of the theory of evolution, and a scientific view of the universe slowly but surely replaced the religious one. Still, while pluralism and plenitude were interesting theories, there was no factual evidence to back up either philosophy. Telescopes could only show so much. There were no canals on Mars, and the clouds of Venus didn't shroud gigantic oceans or primeval forests. The only aliens from other worlds appeared in science fiction books and magazines, or in comic books like Superman. After years of stories about life on other planets, people started wondering where the aliens were, and whether it was possible that we were the most intelligent species in the universe. If the galaxy was so huge and full of life, why hadn't other life forms contacted us? In 1947, the answer to the question in a Cold War atmosphere of distrust and misinformation is not surprising. We had been visited, but our government was concealing the truth about aliens from us. That year, we suddenly learned from several non-fiction books and magazine articles that other eyes were watching. It was the beginning of the flying saucer craze. Flying saucers were featured in innumerable magazine stories and tell-all books, and they dominated late-night talk show radio. Saucers have remained in our skies for the past half-century, despite the lack of any conclusive evidence proving their existence. In 2001, surveys indicate that a majority of people in this country believe Earth has been visited by aliens. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether aliens existed on other planets. Instead, the question became, why were the aliens spying on us? Flying saucers were a major setback for scientists trying to prove that extraterrestrial life existed in the galaxy. Frank Drake, one of the leading astronomers of the 20th century, put it best when he stated, "The problem is that no civilization can thrive on falsehood. In the end, false knowledge leads to wrong decisions, wrong choices of technologies, a wrong distribution of resources, wrong priorities, wrong choice of leaders. And civilization as a whole is the loser. A prime illustration of this is the distribution of resources invested in attempts to understand life in the universe. There is widespread public confusion as to the relative promise of pseudoscientific studies of UFOs, as compared with true scientific programs to find life on other planets." The consequence is that far more attention is given to the pseudoscience than to the real science. So whether you believe in flying saucers or think that they're an ongoing money-making hoax, where are the aliens? If they're here, why are they so shy? After all, building a ship that can navigate the far reaches of outer space takes a fairly sophisticated and advanced civilization, one a good deal more advanced than ours. They can't all be tongue-tied or hiding under sofa cushions. Surely one of them has something to say to the world at large. Even a quick hi would satisfy most people. That's a moral issue that Siegel and Schuster and the many writers and artists who followed never confronted in Superman. Clark Kent was raised in secret, so as not to reveal that he originally came from another planet. Only in the world of comic books would such a concept be accepted as a good idea. Imagine the worldwide excitement there would be on Earth if a flying saucer landed on the White House lawn and a humanoid figure stepped out to bring greetings from another planet. A visit like that would change the world overnight. We'd actually know that we aren't alone in the universe, not to mention that we aren't the smartest or even the strongest kids in the neighborhood. But in comic books, all it meant was a new cop on the block. Which brings us right back to Superman's initial premise. Pluralism and plenitude are interesting theories, but have no basis in fact. Are there alien civilizations in the galaxy? Do we have any proof at all that we are not alone in the universe?